So thanks everyone for taking the time out of all of your busy schedules and joining this session. The agenda is primarily to see, I mean, we've all heard a lot about Gen AI and LLMs, especially in the context of software development, but specifically in QA and testing, how does it apply? What are sort of best practices? Or if you're an organization that's beginning on this journey, how should you think about using Gen AI in your DevOps or CI/CD pipelines? We have a panel of experts here with decades of experience in testing QA, but also in terms of using LLMs over the past 1.5 years. So I'll quickly introduce our panelists. So we have Akash. Akash started his career at Infosys. He then started a company, C42 Engineering. It was an IT services company that primarily catered towards startups. This was acquired by Gojek. At Gojek, he spent about 5 years building out their engineering team. He became SVP of engineering. And then he decamped for a bit to Singapore. He worked on some very interesting projects over there involving agriculture and farming before the entrepreneurial bug bit him again. And that's when he started Real Fast. What Real Fast is that they are basically a Gen AI platform that are helping Salesforce implementation partners write unit tests more effectively. And this is the first part of the problem that they're trying to solve. They plan to expand elsewhere in terms of helping Salesforce partners improve efficiency as well. So that's Akash. Deep is the founder of Context QA. He has over a decade of experience in software development. He worked at companies like Guardheart, Credit Acceptance, Groove. He's been a founder once before, starting Context QA. What Context QA does is that it's a no-code, low-code solution that helps convert manual tests into automated tests using Gen AI. Finally, we have Shrish, Ashtaputre. So Shrish has over 15 years of experience in QA. He started his career at Sybridge. He then joined Calsoft, where he leads the QA Center of Excellence. He also leads an IP called CalTIA, which stands for Calsoft Test Impact Analysis. He's spent some time at Oracle as well. He's sort of an expert, and he's very involved in test drive and all things related to QA. But also now with Gen AI, he's trying to see how it can transform testing and DevOps. So without further ado, I think we can sort of get started. Is there anything I've missed that you guys want to call out about yourselves?
No, I think you covered it all. Good morning, good evening,
Awesome.
everyone.
Yeah. So, I mean, just to kick things off at like 100,000 foot view level, one of the things that struck me is that we've heard a lot about Gen AI, and in terms of coding, you think of GitHub Copilot, Devin, Replit, etc. But somehow you don't hear about Gen AI as it relates to testing or QA that much. And it is starting to change. But I was wondering if you guys have any idea or any reasons why that is the case.
Yeah, I can go.
Sure, Deep.
Yeah, so so testing is like a dynamic in nature, right? So it requires context. So it is not based on the only one pattern, right? So like when we write the code, it has a pattern, it has a structure. Where testing is like a free form, and it changes based on the context, right? What is the context? So there is a hard problem. So you need to break down testing into many smaller problems first, and then tackle each of those problems. And again, while solving each of these problems, you still need to maintain the context, because when you lose the context, you are providing the value back or output which doesn't resonate with the product or the customers or the user experience. So that's where it becomes challenging. The another important problem is when it comes to the quality, that is the like a checkpoint, last checkpoint. People will be relying on that. So you cannot, so there are no chances of the false positives, right? So that's where we put the humans in the place in the first place, because we want to make sure no bugs, no any uncertainties goes through. And to get that accuracy from the Gen AI is also difficult. It requires lots of training, proprietary models or those specific models. And again, it combinations of not only the like text, but visuals and the context altogether. So that makes software testing problem challenging. And that's why you are not seeing too much of those things with Gen AI, because it's not just you ask and it prompt it out. It needs to have the full story behind it before it provides you the answer. And that building that story narrative is very, very complex. And that's where the complexity is.
Yeah, I agree with what Deep has said, because the landscape is quite large. Every product is different. The way you test these products are different. You need to apply a different strategy altogether when it comes to web app versus mobile app versus some enterprise grade application, etc. So things get very complicated. And that is one prominent reason. Also, every organization have their own set of rules when it comes to testing. The tooling part, the way they write tests, the way they maintain artifacts, etc. So it's quite a complex scenario, and that is one reason. But I think the efforts are being made, and even us at Calsoft are making a very good effort in integrating AI or ML into software testing and through our own IP. I'll talk about that later in a brief, but there are efforts being made to streamline the use of AI in software testing.
Got it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, there is very little to
Yeah.
add on top of what these guys have said, right? But I think Deep gave a very nice answer, and like the whole aspect of breaking down the problems is like so bang on. I probably would have given a very short answer though. Writing code is just about text. When doing QA is to a larger degree about visuals, so you want to automate that. I mean, it's a completely different class of problem. So just technically, the models were not where anybody could do it easily. I think what happened with the coding part is the entry barrier is incredibly low. Start doing something on coding, but the entry barrier for you to now meaningfully deliver a high level of confidence in a functional completion of something, that entry barrier is substantially large, because it's not just about generating few tokens, right? You like the kind of tooling, the integrations that you need. The starting point itself is so high, fundamentally. So very different class of problems, orders of magnitude more difficult, I would say.
I think Akash, as you rightly said, QA is more of a creative game. So you need to be more creative in the ways you can test the application.
Yeah. I think it's also interesting that with LLMs and Gen AI, a lot of testing becomes more, it moves from playing defense to playing offense. So moving from being reactive to being sort of more proactive. So with the help of AI, you can have defect prediction, you can have risk-based testing, you can have ML models identify high-risk areas in your code bases. So it's a very different philosophy and mindset. I think that a lot of people in QA DevOps need to adapt to almost.
Yes,
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
I'm
go
not sure
ahead.
Shirish will have what answer, but he mentioned, right, the QA needs to be creative. And this is the answer that you also ask at the same time. These are the not the aspects that QA thought of all the time, because some of this DevOps mindset, right, from the other side of the business. So the value prop you need to see is a business value. First is, right, at the end of the day, what value we are providing to the business. The second is a developer productivity. So that is the another thing. And then it aligns with the QA. So quality is there, but again, how it connects the dots, that is more important, and then bring down. The traditionally, the QAs are not the ones who are on the innovation side. So they are creative in designing side, but not on the innovation side. And that innovation comes from the outside. That is the pattern we are seeing. Context is one of that, but not bragging about that part. But the main part is how you see the problem from the other side. Quality is a big problem. No one can deny it. But to understand at the larger scale is about affecting the business, the product, and the developer's experience. I think it needs to be seen as a different glasses, and then the solution should be coming out of the box, which might not follow the traditional path. Yeah.
Got it. So all three of you have experience using agents in your pipelines. I think Akash, you with a human in the loop to help you write unit tests, or for example, Deep, for you to convert a lot of manual tests into automated tests. What are some of the best practices that you see in designing the system where the human is now not the one who's writing tests, but is now more of a reviewer and checker, and the agent is the one who's actually coming up with the test in this case?
So sorry, what was the question in that?
What is the best practices? Like, how do you envision using agents in terms of writing tests for test coverage and reliability?
Okay. Yeah, let me maybe take a stab at that at two different abstractions, right? One is in terms of usage, maybe. This is what we are figuring out, I guess more so.
Mhm.
We model these agents just like assistants effectively in this particular case because we want to make sure that as much information that can be gathered from the user, we are able to gather. I
Mm.
think the biggest problems agents are going to have in their effectiveness is how do you elicit the right information from the user? Because humans will just, like Slack each other whenever, whatever call will have very different context. But if with agent, the garbage in, garbage out sort of is,
Yeah.
is to the max.
Mhm.
So that I would say is the most important problem. To be honest, right now, in my application, I would not say we have a long running autonomous agents, right? So, I mean, just to be technical, I would say that
Mm.
we are far closer to a very complex workflow uh,
Mm.
which uses LLMs and at some level very um, short running autonomous agents as well. But predominantly the whole thing is controlled by us because we are
Mhm.
solving a narrow problem. I'm not trying to create an agent which can do anything.
Mhm.
Right? That's not the objective. So I know the rough workflow that sort of needs to be followed, but in
Mhm.
that, my ability to gather context from the person who has given me that job, that task, right?
Mm.
Or at times, irrespective of the nuances of the workflow that you have set up or the tools that you use to build context, you're not able to make sense of something. So clearly you are missing. So you would want to go and ask that, what am I missing? If you don't want the human to give up on you, your interface like sort of really matters. And weirdly, at least I used to run into this pattern. I don't know what other
Mm.
people in order to sort of maintain that interactivity, we start with like a thinner autonomous agents.
Mhm.
But giving control to autonomous agents, in my experience, is still not working out very well. I want like a lot more clearer, complex workflows, which use LLMs much more effectively.
Mm.
At least that is what is giving us results within Salesforce unit test class writing. I don't know what has been your experience, Deep.
Yeah. So I can go next. So in my experience, yeah, so both of those problem statement are valid. The first one is you need to provide the right data, the context, and the segregate the common like junk information versus the actual information, because that's the output you're gonna get anyways. And
Mhm.
obviously, continuously like fine tuning those with the real data also is very, very important. Second thing is, like he mentioned, right? We prefer to break it down, that problem statement, into the smaller agents or smaller services, we call it, in other words, right?
Mhm.
And then get the maximum out of it and train those services, those models, and then orchestrate it such a nicely and continuously run it. So yeah, so break it down
So this
and
is multiple agents that are basically speaking to each other that have different functions and purposes and system prompts involved.
Yeah.
correct.
I think
Yes,
what
yeah,
we're calling services and what I'm just like very loosely calling like, workflows and steps. I'm just, sorry, the data engineering mindset. Uh, yeah, it's similar basically. Yeah. Like the
Got
thing
it.
correct,
is
correct.
you are deciding how to break down the problem, not asking the LLM to break down the problem.
Hmm.
Right?
Got
We
it.
have very well-defined domains. We don't need that much
You don't
creativity.
need, yeah. And again, it's repeatable stuff, right? It's for different use cases going to be the same thing again and again. So you'd rather one spend time defining it correctly rather than getting an LLM to do it.
Yeah. So the way I look at the agentic approach specific to QA is basically one, the validation. The other is basically breaking down the workflows in the smaller chunks, because there are a lot of data that typically generated in the overall product development life cycle, which can be consumed by software testers to generate their own artifacts, be it test cases, test strategy, plans, etc., etc. So each data will have its own set of value. For example, the use cases which are stored in Jira will have their own value. The logs which are generated by your test executions, they will have their own value. So the way I look at implementing the agenting approach is basically a specific agent, which is a purpose-built agent for a specific kind of an artifact. So it takes sort of a deep dive into that artifact, try to get as much as intelligence from that particular artifact, and basically help out in a larger big picture scenario, in the way the QAs will devise their strategy, they create their tests or create their basically automation code. So that's how I look at that. And the second aspect is basically validation. So
Yeah.
basically, what if one data set is not giving me a great deal of value? Then, I mean, can I basically rely on something else? If I can tune up that other agent to add more value to my overall big picture scenario, how can I do that? So these sort of workflows I look at from the agentic kind of an approaches to implement.
Got it. I think what Akash said, I agree with you. I think the distinction between agents and having a human in the loop plus LLM workflows, it's sort of a little blurry. I define agents as autonomous, something that can carry out actions autonomously. I think you will still need, now whether you need a human in the loop at that point, who knows? But I think, Akash, you're saying in your case, you guys don't use agents.
I would say unless and until your feedback loop is objective and 100% dependable, you will need a human in the loop. For example, I'll give an example. Let's say so we use a static code analyzer tool called PMD, fairly standard for Salesforce, Apex code. Now let's say PMD tells me that I'm using, let's say, creating a SOQL query in a loop, right? It's a bad practice. So it detects that, look, this is the bad practice. Now what we have to do is we have to basically go and fix that particular code, run PMD again. It needs to tell me that, look, this is now working, right? Now, I also need to make sure that I've not broken any other functionality. Now, let's say I go through I have 95% code coverage. I run that. Maybe there are some other set of tests that I run. And now I'm comfortable that, look, nothing is really broken. And the type of change that I have done, because I'm actually fixing the PMD command, I don't need a pull request review. Is like an extreme version where I will say that you don't need someone to review. Otherwise, you always need a human to review, because look, people are ultimately getting paid to take accountability. There is a legal chain of accountability. It stops at the person who says that, look, it's my problem. Whether I use LLM or I don't use LLM, I have to take accountability. That will never ever go away. Cannot.
Yeah. And I think at least for the initial period of time, you need to have the human in the loop. You cannot straight away go to the agents and completely rely on them.
I'll give you a parallel over there, right? Maybe the right way to look at it is when I start working with someone new, let's say I'm the tech lead, I'm ultimately accountable for what happens on that particular product. Someone new joins, I'll probably spend an hour every day reviewing their code.
Exactly.
Over the period, that basically goes down to maybe 5 minutes a day, but I still review that code for 5 minutes and I am accountable for it. We have literally seen this currently in people who adopt our tools, where they spend substantial amount of time reviewing the code early on. Slowly, the confidence builds where the amount of code goes down, but they still have to review. That will not do ever.
You need a human's neck to basically grab their neck if something goes wrong. I mean, you're paying for outcome as action, right? Like you want to find a face
Fundamentally
next to it.
saying LLMs are probabilistic. They can't
Yeah.
take accountability. And legally there is no, right? Like Microsoft is not going to take accountability, or OpenAI is not going to take accountability for the code that it created, right? We know that someone.
Yeah, I think in the
It's never
future
going
that
away.
might change. No, I
So
don't know,
what
Akash.
happens
I
is
bet
the
you.
insurance. Say what you're saying, right? Like let's split the financial models over there.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, now what you will see is that we are willing to live with the consequences. So we are okay that nobody's taking accountability. What that means is the person who developed that particular product and then launched it and then saw whether it can be successful or not is taking the accountability. You still have a human taking accountability, but now you are statistically reviewing the output, not everyone. You will still review it. Sorry, okay, I don't mean to harp on that point, but right, I think it's a very important part. There will always be human.
Yeah, it's all about consequences. Yeah. So yeah, what are they? And also just want to add one point. So earlier there will be a 5 points, but now only a 1 point for the review, right? So there might be 5 checkpoints earlier in the process, and now at the last stage only you are reviewing. So still you are getting lots of momentum, and you can say that all other 4 steps that no one is reviewing and there is no one in the loop. But yes, at least once in a process there will be someone. Yes.
So, question for you, Shrish, actually, and I think there is some concern around what will happen to QA and quality teams in product companies and how will they be impacted? What, and this is a question from the audience as well, but what skills will be essential for automation testers in the future, and how do you sort of future-proof yourself in this domain, given everything we're talking about Gen AI in the context of this?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So, in my opinion, the QA skills are getting augmented by the AI, not replaced. So that's the first important point. But looking at the broader scenario, I think the skills which are going to be required by the future QA engineers is more on the data side. They need to have some level of understanding of the data engineering, data analytics, etc. So they can make better inferences. They can understand basically the patterns, the usage patterns of the application, how the trends are changing. Apart from the typical coding skills such as Python, Java, these programming languages or the relevant frameworks, etc., these skills are going to be super, super important in my opinion. It is very important to understand how the customers are actually going to use these products, because if you look at the interoperability metrics these days for different applications, a simple mobile application, there are plenty of platforms, different operating systems, different kind of user personas, which are essentially the end users of these applications. So understanding the entire ball game is very, very important. And for that, knowing some level of data engineering and related technologies, in my opinion, will be very, very important for future QA engineers. Even not just future, but even starting today. So future is not like 10 years from now. It literally 24 hours from now.
Got it.
Hi guys, sorry about this.
Yeah.
Hey Ayush, no worries. So Ayush, our fourth panelist, just joined us. Ayush has spent time at Zoho as well as a couple of startups that you may have heard of, like Ola and Rebel Foods. He last worked as a mobile lead at Riggy, and that's where he decided to start Quash. Quash is a product that's designed for mobile software development testing using AI. Ayush, have I covered what Quash does appropriately?
Exactly. This is what I'm building, yes.
Perfect. So question for you, Ayush, and not to put you on the spot, given that you just came in, but in mobile QA, what specific challenges do AI-driven solutions solve better than traditional approaches over here? And why did you decide to focus on mobile software testing first before going elsewhere?
Got it. I think for every other testing, unlike web and backend, wherein you can deploy things on your own servers. Mobile has to take a route of Play Store and App Store. So they come with a different guidelines altogether. Also, when I say mobile, like say for a case Android actually works for like there are devices for 2000 rupees, also devices of 2 lakh rupees. And then the developer and the tester needs to be uh, like very much accurate and cover all of the cases so that it can you know uh, test or work on both the in both the ranges. Now what happens with mobile is that you have to anyways run APM and you have to write scripts to run that on thousands of devices anyways. I thought, anyways, the task of validation itself is a very repetitive and redundant task. And I realized that, for you, for any QA for mobile, what they essentially do is they understand the PRD and they read the design and they sort of then write all the test cases and then tries to validate in 10, 15, 20 devices, which I thought it can be automated altogether. With given that Gen AI was here, and then we started off altogether.
Got it. I think so somebody just posted a very interesting post by Jyoti Bansal, and this is something that we were discussing before the panel started, but essentially QA engineers are not going to go away. Instead, they're going to be more sought after than developers. And that's what we spoke about, which is that because productivity of writing code increases significantly with the help of LLMs, the bottleneck is going to shift from writing code to the testing and QA and all of that. And you need thoughtful, experienced QA people in order to make sure your code doesn't break. So I think that's sort of the opposite view, which is that QA people are not going to be out of a job. Instead, there's going to be a lot more demand for them.
So I think QA is required. I think given that mobile has a lot of manual efforts. Like when you see mobile actually comes in any mobile B2C mobile app company, they have more manual testers than automation testers. Automation
really?
though will still be there, yeah.
Okay.
So there are actual users, because if I've worked and consulted a lot of mobile apps companies, and that is where I realized that manual testing by itself is a very tedious process. That okay, I have to go to this screen and that screen, another screen. So what Kosh is trying to do is also not replace QA angle altogether, but empower those people so that they don't have to spend 3 days of time into doing manual testing.
Got it. Shrish, anything to add here?
No, that what Ayush said is quite interesting. And Ayush, another point that you made was about the device matrix, right? 2,000 to 2 lakh rupees, and how basically the personas differ, although the base operating system and many things basically remain same. So typically, how have you seen the overall improvement in the QA productivity with tools such as Squash, and especially augmented with AI? Would like to understand more on that. Ayush?
Couldn't understand. Just a minute. I was actually. I'm sorry. With Quash, I think I missed out on the question altogether because of some internet connection. I'm not sure, but yeah, I think. Can you?
You want me to repeat? Yeah. So my question was, how have you seen the productivity increase of the QA engineers with the use of Quash?
Yeah, I think yes. So what? Okay, I'll tell it. Generally, what happens was after a PRD is built and the designs are ready, a QA is made to sit and like
Hey, Ayush, you're breaking up.
write all the test cases. They would go on and then start writing test cases. That's the point where QA would cover a lot of. Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, now you are, but you are coming in and out.
Yeah. here, if I'm audible. Yeah. So what generally happens is that once a QA reads a PRD, understands a design, then they would sit down and write all the test cases, which is where there are a lot of chances that you could miss out on a lot of corner cases. Also, it doesn't come up altogether. Why the productivity has increased is because Kosh, as soon as you put in Kosh actually runs all the application all together so that it generates a context all, and so you don't have to, a QA don't have to write all the test cases, but rather review that okay, if things are covered there or not. And then once those review are there, then the QA can also decide, okay, I want this feature to be to be rolled out for 20% of the user. So okay, 20% can be of a low-end device or a high-end device. So I can configure that device thing and then start off with the testing. Which is where QA does not, earlier it used to have, like they used to actually do it very much manual process, putting a Jenkins pipeline or maybe a different pipeline and then deploy it over browser stack or some other device farm, which was more like like the setup itself would take a lot of time if you want to do that. And that's how productivity is getting increased in the QA, mobile QA.
Understood. Thanks, Aish.
I think one of the questions in the from the audience is, can you demo how an AI agentic workflow would look like for testing or integrating with Salesforce, like Akash had mentioned? Akash, do you want to take this question?
Sorry, I won't be able to do the demo for this right
How,
now.
but can you sort of, how would you lay that out, the workflow?
For the workflow itself?
Yeah,
Oh,
using agents.
Okay. Okay, so very simplistically, so first is you need to describe what is the test to be written, right? So the user basically comes and selects the project that they're working on to walk for like whose sandbox they're connected to already. Then they select like which source class they want to write the test for. Either they can select the scope through sort of line selection or potentially just selecting the methods. At which point now, this is where the back and forth between the AI agent and the human sort of starts. Because just based on this information, the AI now quickly looks and says that, hey, is this sort of a batch type job? Is this like, like a trigger handler? Because there are different strategies that you need to follow for each of these, as well as a different kind of a context that you need, right? For example, if it's a trigger class, I need to know what is a trigger handler. And there is no fixed convention about how to identify this, unfortunately, at times. So you then come back with a set of questions back to the user saying that, hey, I'm making this particular assumption. Is this the trigger handler that I should use, or you want me to use something else? Because if I make that wrong assumption, everything below that sort of gets is wrong. Beyond this, now you start working on the scenario creation, because again, the next most important thing is like, what am I writing the test for, really? So the AI would come up with its own set of scenarios in case you have given any access to the documentation where people have sort of spoken about what all scenarios needs to be handled. So a combination of that and code, you come up with scenarios, show it to the user, and now user does a back and forth. This, by the way, this back and forth is like a form, right? Because I'm managing test scenarios. There is nothing for AI to do over here. It needs to be a good interface for managing test scenarios. So I basically like now look at all what those test scenarios are, let the user sort of change those. And then that is when we go back and start writing the code. This is where the agent actually goes into an asynchronous task. The expectation is that whenever it is done or has any questions, it will get back to you. Till then, go and do something else. So the agent will go, can take few minutes over there or maybe a little longer. Some of the code actually still currently comes to us for review before we send it to the user. So we sort of take care of that. We want to make sure, because like, these are enterprise clients using ensure a certain level of quality in that. So we take care of all of this. The code basically now goes to the user. Now this is where user can effectively interact in two different ways. One is we actually do give like an I would not call it an IDE, but it's an editor with basically like a Apex code highlighting errors being shown, extra metadata being shown over there, and in case there are any issues, sort of highlight what those issues are. In case the issues are really easy for the user to solve, user can actually just edit those. It's faster at times to just do this than keep giving instructions, because the point is to do things faster, right? It doesn't matter who does it. Then it gets fixed in case, let's say, there is a continuation of work that needs to happen, or there is a structural feedback on that, oh, we want all of these objects to be created using this factory. You sort of misread how to create the test data set, go and take care of all of this. Those can be now just what we call like a corrective prompt. And in this particular back and forth, ultimately like a pull request gets reviewed, so get raised. Now the parts that we really need to work on, and I want to touch upon something that I think Shrish mentioned, or sorry, no, Ayush I think originally mentioned. This whole dev versus QA as to like, oh, devs become more productive or the QA. I'm not sure is the way I think about it. What's going to happen is, look, your LLMs will, there are two types of tasks that happen across any knowledge work. Someone generates it, either there is an objective or a subjective review of it. That's it. LLMs will come and now start helping you in both. The LLMs will help you in generation. The LLMs will also help you in review. Ultimately, you still have to be there for generating. You still have to be there for review. It can be the same person doing it, or it might be, let's say, like a junior and a senior, like a tech lead sort of doing it as well. I suspect the same will hold true with QA as well, which is, and by QA, I mean, let's say UI testing for mobile or anything else. Someone has to create the test scenarios, someone has to review them, someone has to come up with a Selenium code, someone has to still sort of review it. Make sure that once the tests are passing, that it is actually testing the things that I expected to test, right? Now this dynamic, I think, will exist all the way from PRD writing to QA. But in both, there is a create and review in every role. And,
Agreed,
and AI
Akash.
will help both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And
That's a good point. And I think
yeah, and
in many agentic workflows, people are trying out things along these same lines. That when something is generated, there has to be something else which should go and validate that generation part, and the feedback is given and improvements are made into that.
Yeah,
correct. And I would like to walk through a little bit about the UI side of it. So because and I think very well explained, um, Akash, from your side. So just one thing I want to mention is whenever you start this multi-agent stuff, right? And when you say demo or 101, it's first is the source. And Akash highly mentioned about the first is the documentation, right? So, and in a documentation also what kind of instruction it has. And specifically talking about the testing, then it is a workflow or the user journey could be the very valuable. And in the testing piece also, the dependency also makes a lot of sense. So first you need to think about the like data source for yourself. So it could be a documentation, it could be your existing test cases that you have written, and that can be fed in, and that could be behave as like a base knowledge for your application. Now you can prompt it up and then ask a question, and then it will generate the test plan or test scenarios for you. And based on that, you can ask agent again to go and perform the action. Now, how intelligent your agent is, it will go and start performing the action. But at the same time, that agent should have the reasonings that if something is not there, then what to do. So there should be a feedback loop there. And that feedback loop also needs to be either like pause or a retry. Like there are so many things you can play around with that. And then continuously it goes through the process and provides you the answer. While it is going through those processes, you are collecting the logs, you are taking the screenshots and making decision at each level and navigating. So it's like reinforcement learning or whatever the way you can say it, but you are like providing this context continuously to those agent and making decision at that time and reasoning through it and providing the data. At the same time, you are building your own architecture of labeling, means adding at each step you are labeling those images or labeling that code or so you can make a very meaningful decision at that time rather than just providing any answer that. And like Shirish mentioned, there should be somewhere the evaluation model that we constantly check the response also, that what is like, it is a 50% accurate, 80% or 100% accurate. And depends on that, we make a decision or fail those scenarios versus pass those scenarios, and go from there. And then at the end, we collect all the details and generate a report, but also analyze with the baseline behavior that we wanted to do to make it consistent. So yeah, so there is a smaller chunks of those agents designed for particular purposes, continuously evaluating and providing the context and getting the value out of it. I think that is the best approach, or that is the normal approach that people prefer, and that is
Yeah,
the best.
and I think that is very critical because if QA is sitting at the end of your release cycle, and the go no go decision has to be made based on the overall analysis of the QA, then it becomes super important to basically arm them up with a lot of these insights where they can actually comment on the readiness of a release. So you cannot basically just blindly trust any tool or anything of that sorts, but it has to be foolproof. So how do you make it foolproof? Of course, I mean, things will become foolproof eventually, but having that human angle, the feedback loops,
Yeah.
the continuous validation, all these things are super important at that stage.
So one of the questions of the audience is, can Shrish or Deep suggest how you will automate the AI output? As a result, will be changing dynamically based on the data set that I guess acts as the input over here.
I can answer that question if you,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that is where the agentic nature comes in, what the question is. So the question is about, right, how AI can help, right, when the data set is changing dynamically. So let's say e-commerce application, right, where things are changing frequently. It is not a static application that stays same forever. And there is a deals page coming up. There are like seasons wise summer shopping coming up, right? So data could be dynamic. And at that time, that agentic nature of those your applications or the testing becomes more powerful. So let's take at the example what you are doing currently now. So if you're automating right now, you're writing Selenium code or Playwright code continuously, right? That is a hard-coded code, by the way, that you are just saying that click, go there and click there and go and do or perform particular actions. If something is changed in application, all your taste starts breaking. And that's where the adaptability becomes very crucial. When your application gets changed, how fast it will take time, or how fast you can adapt those changes and apply to those tastes, and then recover your testing processes. That is the biggest bottleneck even today, that how much time it takes. Always it is 2 weeks behind sprint, 4 weeks behind sprint, depends on the company. But with agentic AI, it should be dynamic enough to adapt that change. And because we are like these agents, right, depends on which company is designing. But in our case, context here, we provide the baseline behavior. And then baseline behavior gets modified as the application gets changed and sent for the review for the QA team, that this is change. Once they approve, then it is already adopted that change in the testing process. So when the next test starts, because we analyze the video, we analyze the images, we analyze the code, combining all, we set the baseline. So when the next time it goes out there and performs those tests, it takes into account that baseline behavior. And that's where the adaptability of like new data sets or dynamic data sets comes in the play. And that's where, yeah, it becomes very, very helpful.
Got it. I think one of the relevant questions from the audience here is that data seems to be significant for some of these LLMs, and I think more relevant over here, LLMs, but also in terms of workflows using these LLMs. And is any governance in place for feeding context or data to your solutions? Like, I guess the governance structure for the data pipeline in that forms part of your application.
Correct. So if I answer, and then Shirish, you can go, just a very quick answer. So in the data governance side, so there are 2 points, right? When we mentioned that yes, everyone should learn AI, everyone should data, but here it's very crucial that everyone understands the data structure, like what data we are going to feed in, because it's not any data. It is a clear data. What is the output we are expecting? How are we labeling? So there are tons of things goes inside the data as well. So yes, data is the most important thing, but how we are, what type of data and what type of value we are going to take out from that. So that is very important. And if you are just passing everything through the open AI, then yes, data governance is huge. But if you are building your own, or if you are taking open source LLMs and fine tuning with your own data sets, and you know that what is the output would look like, and how would you like evaluate that, the accuracy of that, right? So that becomes data privacy, data governance becomes easy, because you are running everything on your own infrastructure, and no data is going outside at that point. So that are the two things I wanted to mention.
Yeah, so I think, and that is true for not just for QA, but any AI use case. The AI is as good as the training data will be. So the better the data, the better the output, and that's a no-brainer. So as far as the data governance is concerned, typically in QA projects, the common practice is to use synthetic data. So QAs typically generate their own data depending on the application use case, what kind of input parameters are required, etc. So as far as basically you are generating a synthetic data, you kind of know that it is sort of a dummy data, which kind of mimics the real world scenarios. It's plain and straightforward. Models can be fine-tuned using that data, and you can basically test it out how it is actually helping you out in testing. When it comes to proprietary data, which is, for example, let's say you're testing in production, or you're trying to basically gather some information or data from production environment and try to basically fine-tune or train your models on that, then definitely there are certain guardrails are important, because there could be the data privacy, data safety things will essentially kick in. But as long as it is a synthetic data that you're using, I think you are the owner of that data, so you should be able to basically use it
So I think
without
when you
much.
work with enterprises, this becomes a very black and white setup, because all of their data is in their tenants that
Correct.
don't really move out, right? So that aspect of data governance is really clean and clear for us. But yeah, you will have sort of boundaries like that are enforced architecturally, and you have to be able to guarantee these to your customers. Otherwise, you're not getting any enterprise clients.
Absolutely. That is very important.
So Asekra had a follow-up question, separate question, but on the agents topic. So how can agentic AI help in shifting quality left? So instead of doing UI tests, can AI do API testing or PL, SQL level unit testing on seeded code?
Absolutely.
Maybe
For
Akash, over to
example,
you.
with Salesforce. So look, Salesforce is constantly moving towards like a no-code, low-code system, right? Um, and for example, you end up creating flows in that. Now flow, I mean, look, you are creating like a drag and drop system now to create some sort of a workflow over there, and you're defining how this workflow should operate. But ultimately, there is some sort of decisions being made, and sure, even if it is a configuration, ultimately there is some binary code that runs over there. Now, so what starts happening is at one level, by the way, Salesforce itself says that the way you cover this is you write test in Apex, which is programming language. Because specific, and again, this might be very peculiar to Salesforce, right? I don't want to extrapolate this to everything else. But in Salesforce, I literally think of Apex almost like a DSL on top of the complete data and configuration that is there in the sandbox, which includes files, which includes the past history of your own execution or the base objects or the metadata. You can access everything using code. The fascinating thing is, even though you are creating those workflows on UI, you want to now understand that because there are also triggers involved in that, there are background processes there. What happens in concurrency? How does something operate at a certain load? How do you do that in any other way? So there are some aspects of these where you are fundamentally configuring workflows, right? I'm not talking about the UI flow. The logic is happening in the background. You can certainly very easily shift the testing to, rather than doing it UI based, doing code based, where you have access to those configurations, right? So now that's an equivalent of doing like a API testing, but in this case, because I have access to the DSL, I'm effectively just testing that, look, how is this particular workflow configured? I can check for that. I can trigger it programmatically. I can look at the results of it programmatically. And yeah, I mean, Salesforce actually encourages this.
Got it. And follow-up question, Akash, for you. How will you automate testing which requires usage of emulator, simulator, APM, or even the manual device? Are you going to build an in-house version of these, or will you integrate with agents?
No, currently I'm really looking. So look, I think we decided to go very deep into one particular vertical, into one particular use case. So we are currently focusing only and only on writing test classes for Apex, which is the programming language using which people customize Salesforce. Because Salesforce has this compliance that your code must have at least 75% code coverage, right? Honestly, when I first heard that
I know you
as
told me.
unit testing, compliance, like I literally could not believe it for 3 days. I was like going and doing searches and talking to other people. I'm like, what am I hearing it correct? That there is this enterprise pass which says that no, you have to write unit test. Fascinating. But yeah, we're basically just focusing on that part right now, and we do believe that that's at the foundation of what we are trying to do. Because look, while we are looking at unit testing, we want to develop a platform on which more and more Salesforce related work can be done. I want some source of truth. I want some foundation which reduces the review effort, right? Which gives me some sort of a positive feedback loop. Given specifically that unit test as a construct and that 75%, and most of the good companies go to 90-95% actually in this. That gives us a fascinating construct. I think we were talking about this before the podcast actually started. Um, what we are seeing now is I can keep my test constant. Let's say I'm already at 95% coverage. And now I can get my agent to start changing the source class. Earlier, I was keeping the source class constant and changing the test class, right? But it doesn't matter, right, which class I'm changing. And now in this case, because I have a higher code coverage, I can now start refactoring code. Some really gnarly, really complex code. And it's not that I will take it to its logical conclusion in the right way, but that
Yeah.
will help to just start deconstructing complex logic, which you look at it, you go over that line 5 times and you're still like, okay, I don't know what I read, right? At least that doesn't remain the case. Your naming inconsistencies get resolved. You can start applying your automated tools of PMD to, let's say, find dead parts of the code base, because in complex workflows you have dead code. The latest PMD allows you to identify dead code, right? So like there is, by the way, I do believe that as AI contribution to software development improves, the amount of scanning tools, right? Whether it's a performance scanning, security scanning, code quality scanning, any sort of a bad pattern scanning. Salesforce, you can see clearly moving in this direction where they are now like they're introducing a package called SF
Agent.
Scanner in
Okay.
CLI. It's a CLI command line. It's a node app actually. So if you look at
Okay.
SFCL, it's a node app literally, right? And now they are adding like a package over there called SF Scanner, which will have 4 different engines for scanning. I do believe that the automated code scanning related uh, advancements will now really explode, because now you can also get agents to start fixing them. See, earlier you were just owing problems. Beyond a certain point, humans are like, yeah, I have enough problems. I don't need to know that I have more. It's okay. Give me just the top high critical and it's good enough. But what happens when your ability to solve those problems and the time it takes to solve those problems starts going down? You will now invest more and more and more
More and more, yeah.
to say that, look, can I identify a problem? Because if I'm able to identify a problem, I have this very low cost way of going and solving these problems, which makes everyone's life easy.
Yeah.
It reduces the risk in my delivery. It allows new developers to get onboarded much faster. I mean, I'm fundamentally arguing why we should write good code, right? All I'm saying is that I do believe that the our ability to, like, the cost of doing that and the complexity of doing that, the effort to do that should dramatically go down, is sort of one very side effect I see of what's happening, just based on my personal experience so far.
Got it. Shrish, and I think we are at time. If you guys are okay, can we spend about 10 minutes more? I'm sure all of you guys are super busy and I will respect your time, but
Yeah, I'm okay
I
with
think
10
we're good.
minutes.
10 minutes is fine. Yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
All right, great. So Shrish, question for you. And how does AI affect QA specifically in storage, server virtualization, cloud migration, that area in terms of testing?
I think the same way the AI is affecting rest of the domains,
Yeah.
because if you decouple the domain angle from these products, at the end it is at the bottom, it is all QA. So either you are coming in from the interface such as API or a UI or a CLI. So any kind of intelligence that you apply to automating the workflows or the tests for API, UI, or CLI, the same basically applies to these kind of products as well. However, basically the domain angle plays a very critical role, and where basically the AI based tools which will help you identify the corner cases, edge cases, looking at the requirement documents, that will be a good that will be an added value. Of course, learning, because there is a lot of in these cases where the data center products are deployed, there is a large number of customer support executives also, which are essentially field engineers, and they basically day in day out they talk to the customers, understand their pain areas, understand their usage patterns, etc., and they bring that valuable information back into the product development organization. And on top of that, then companies develop, fine tune, or optimize their overall products. I think that piece of information will be leveraged by testers using AI to basically infer that information, try to create get more insights into how actually the products are being used, what are the patterns, what are the trends, etc., etc., and that knowledge can then be applied to further enhance their QA strategy and approach, which essentially helps build the more and better quality products for the organization.
Got it. So last question for all of you, and this is something, given the audience is comes from senior engineering leadership, but also in QA and testing. If I am a company or an enterprise that's looking to start my journey in terms of AI-driven testing, what are pitfalls that I should look out for? And what is the starting point for this?
Yeah, I can go for this.
Sure.
Yeah, so AI in software testing is not new, similar to what was before, is automation testing itself. So build versus buy decision is still there. One is evaluating the skill set within the team, what engineering skill set you have. Another would be the bandwidth of the engineers, or the priority, right? So if you have like 2 years, 1 year, like down the road, and then you need testing, then obviously reinventing or inventing or optimizing your processes and moving in that direction is good. But there are lots of problems are being solved already out there, right? Some are open source, some are not. So you need to evaluate from all those perspectives, the skill, the time, and the urgency, how quickly you want. And rather than inventing the wheel, can you leverage that? Because depends on your company. Your company's primary business is not to build the quality like AI in software testing. You can enhance that and ship the product faster. So yeah, better to focus on that, to leverage the tools available by keeping in your mind your personal interest about the cost associated with it, the dependency, right? Such as it is a vendor lock-in versus not, and data privacy. So those are the areas that they need to think through other than the traditional build versus buy approach.
Yeah. I think first the question to ask will be, I mean, does my problem will be solved by AI? Do I really need an AI in first place?
Yeah, and I think that's
Or
not just
it's
testing,
more
but
like
all use cases, you need to ask that
correct,
question first. Like, does it
correct,
really need an AI solution?
exactly. Or is it more like a data engineering problem? I can basically have some analytics and try to understand, leverage the data and understand the patterns, etc. But by and large, selection and tools and selection of technologies comes at a much later stage. The first thing would be to take a look at and take a deep look at the data and artifacts that you have in your organization. Because as I said earlier, any AI model is as better as the data is, the training data is. So you need to basically look at what kind of information you have, which you can then process through AI to generate your inferences. So that should be your first step to basically understand. Of course, the first step is whether AI is really, really essential for me to solve this problem. And then if the answer is yes, then go next and take a look at your data, analyze the data and see whether it can basically help AI to make better inferences, or I'm good at what I'm doing right now, maybe manually. So I think that should be the first step into the journey.
Yeah. Are you, Shakash, any additions?
I think that's pretty much very valid. Also, in terms of just like selecting AI, I think nowadays what is being promised, like I mean would touch Akash's point here, is that you know outcome as a SaaS with AI is what is being promised. And I think Shrish and Akash mentioned that as good as the data, like if your data is good, then the training happens good. And I think all of it starts from there. And people should validate a lot before putting out data and then also trying out on different LLMs. But yes, I think people should, I mean, everyone should actually first validate if there's a need, or it's just an automation can be solved through tech, maybe.
Sorry, I don't really have much to add apart from just one warning. Be wary of anything that looks magical, which doesn't ask you to review much. Just stay away from that, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think on that note, we'll conclude this session. Thanks a lot to all the panelists for taking time out of what I'm sure must be a very busy schedule. And thanks a lot to everyone who's attended. I hope this session was useful. I know we had many questions that we didn't get a chance to get to. I think some of the audience asked, can we have a session with a live demo with some of these amazing use cases, etc. Just a shout out, I think all of you guys must have gotten an email with the names of the companies that these panelists run. Please go to their website and check it out if this is something that you're interested in. Their products can help you solve some of the problems that you might be sort of facing. Also, we will send out a recording of this session shortly next week. So thanks a lot, everyone, for your time. Really appreciate it. And have a good night to everyone who's in India, and have a good start of the day to everyone who's in the States.
Hey, thanks, Anshu. Thanks, everybody. Have a great
All right.
evening.
Thank you.
Everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.